backyard. The sun is shining. It's a beautiful day outside. Mountains are reaching into the sky in the distance. In your corner of your yard, your garden's growing nice. Tomatoes look good. You're on Mars. And this could be the reality. This could be a thing that could happen. We could all eventually be on Mars with a backyard with tomatoes. But it's not going to happen anytime soon at the rate we're moving. NASA is our liaison with space and everything in it, including Mars, obviously. And they are a huge innovator in technology that changes and improves everybody's lives, in the United States and out. Without NASA, we would not have gone to the moon. Without NASA, we wouldn't know nearly as much as we do about our cosmological origins, and without NASA, we wouldn't have a host of life-changing technologies that we actually do have today. For instance, NASA is responsible for extraordinarily high-tech water purification systems that are being used in third world countries that give millions of people water every single day. And they're also responsible for one of the most key transportation revolutions in our history, the GPS. They put the first satellite into space to make that possible. And those are just two of the spin-offs, a term coined by NASA, that describe technologies that they designed while in other pursuits of space travel. And you can find a plethora of them on their website under their publication spin-offs. In spite of all this, though, NASA is underfunded at best. According to an article by Stephen Clark at Spaceflight Now, a news website about space travel, NASA received only 0.48% of the total federal budget for 2015, right here. That is only higher than the very first two times they were ever funded, when they were still an idea, an experiment. That is nearly 8 times less than what they were funded for at their peak in 1966, in the middle of the space race with the USSR. In 2015, NASA received $18.1 billion, and that does sound like a hefty sum of money, especially to college students, but when you take into account the size of NASA and the caliber of their mission, you start to realize that it's really not that much money, especially when you contrast it with the aforementioned data of 1966, where they received $43.5 billion when you adjust for inflation. And both of those numbers can be found at their respective budget sheets on NASA's website. According to an article by Dan Leone on Space.com, lack of funding has slowed NASA's projects tremendously. In fact, their Commercial Crew program, a program to send people into space that are qualified but that have not gone through the astronaut program, that was originally supposed to go live in 2017, has been pushed back a large number of years, as late as maybe 2020 or 2021. Okay, so this is an issue. Where do you get the money, though? Well, to understand where the money is going to come from, we have to look at the federal budget. The federal budget is broken into 3 parts. First of these is mandatory spending. In mandatory spending, we have Social Security, food, transportation, the things that essentially allow the country to run properly. The second is discretionary spending, and this is just kind of a fancy way of saying everything else that we spend money on. And in here, NASA falls into the tiny 3% that is science. And the final part is the interest on our debt, which is just the money we pay on the money that we've borrowed. So when everything is compiled into one graph, you start to get an idea of where all the money is going. The biggest slice is Social Security, unemployment, and labor. Second is Medicare and health, with the third ranking at military. And the very least, science, with a measly 1%, and NASA taking up only about half of that. So I still haven't answered the question. Where do we get the money? Well, you have to take money from other programs, because all the money has clearly already been allocated. So you've probably heard the phrase that the military is too big, and that our military is bigger than the next 8 largest militaries combined. And I'm sure that phrase is no stranger to you. And the thing is, that phrase does hold some water. This is a slide showing war frequency, and our military power in this scope is just unnecessary. You can see that war in the 1940s was rampant, but in the 2000s it's nearly non-existent. And this graph is compiled through a plethora of studies, including one by Cullen Schultz from Smithsonian Magazine, a very reputable publishing house. On top of that, interstate war that happens between two military states like the United States and China or Russia, is the kind of war that often gets cited as the biggest threat to the United States. And the thing is, that is the war that is almost completely extinct. In fact, you don't see it even barely in the 2000s, at the very beginning once. And also, on top of all that, size isn't everything, and that's not just a joke. Having better technology is infinitely more important than the number of people that you have. You could have 1,000 spearmen, and one guy with a gun and 1,000 bullets is going to win every single time. And the military isn't just one of our overfunded programs. Other programs could actually be hurting overall economic stability, namely Social Security. And in an article by Don Watkins on voicesforreason.com, he covers a study that finds Social Security is bad for everybody in the economy, young and old, even the people receiving the money. He asserts Social Security needs to be removed completely for reasons that deserve a talk of its own. So what could you do with all that money? Well, Well, if you cut military and Social Security by only 2%, just 2%, and give it to NASA, NASA would see a 200% increase in their funding. That would easily restore them above space race levels to a budget of $55.7 billion. That, in the late 60s, NASA put us on the moon with less money than that, only 60 years after the very first aircraft was ever invented. So what could they do with that much money now? All of NASA's programs could be fully funded. We could be to Mars within the decade, maybe even 5 years, and I don't need to tell you how exciting that is. We could mine asteroids that are estimated to have thousands of pounds of gold inside of them, as well as other extraordinarily valuable and scarce elements. Scarcity, as we know it, would be on the road to being completely eradicated, over. The economy, aside from the previous reason, would benefit tremendously. In 2003, according to an internal review, NASA economically boosted every single state, and in almost every other year, boosted a majority of the states. And, no-brainer, increasing funding to NASA increases the number of jobs that it can create. Very high quality, very high paying, very economically stimulating jobs like that. And the technology coming from it, the spin-offs, would be extraordinary. That technology outflow would make everybody's lives better. Everyone from the people in this room that can worry about going to space, as well as the people in third world countries that need clean water. But none of that is going to happen if NASA doesn't get the funding that it desperately needs. And you can help. Write your congressman, tell them how much this all matters, tell them all the benefits, and yes, I see you shaking your head. Whenever did writing your congressman help? So if that isn't enough for you, there are several organizations that you can join, namely Penny for NASA. It's an organization seeking to be outspoken about funding NASA, specifically getting them 1% of the federal budget, 1 penny on the dollar, i.e. Penny for NASA. Their members regularly display collectively their desire for NASA's funding, online and off. And you can join at their website, pennyfornasa.org. Your and my children, and maybe even we, would be able to truly shoot for the stars if NASA was able to be funded. Funding NASA is in the direct interest of progressing humanity, so I just have one question for all of you. Do you want to progress humanity? Thank you very much.